Hello, all. Welcome back to 92,000 Hours, the podcast where we acknowledge that we spend the majority of our lives at work and we discuss opportunities to find purpose and meaning in those 92,000 working hours. Today, we are speaking with Shawn Teigen, who is president of the Utah Foundation. Shawn is a public policy leader in Utah with nearly 20 years serving at the Utah Foundation. And the Utah Foundation itself provides independent, unbiased, accurate research on public policy issues and questions within the state of Utah. Shawn is also an adjunct professor at the University of Utah, teaching a Master of Public Policy course for the next generation of policy researchers. In full disclosure, I'm currently the chair of the board for the Utah Foundation, so I have to acknowledge my bias for Shawn's good work and the good work of the folks that are at the Utah Foundation. But today, we'll be talking with Shawn about engagement. Okay, so Shawn, I'm so excited to have you here with me today. I have actually been waiting to have you on this podcast and thought you'd be a fabulous guest regardless. So this season, having you as one of our changemakers just is going to make my day. I can't wait to introduce you to everyone.
I am so excited to be joining you on this podcast. And this also makes my day already. And we've just begun.
Awesome. So I start the podcast for everyone, asking them the big question. And I used to ask this of students who were in the facilitated program I ran, and it always surprised people. So I give people on this podcast a little bit of a heads up, which is, here's the question. If you remove any reference to work, school, sports, religion, volunteerism, all the things that we do, what is it about yourself that you're the most proud of for who you are and as a human?
So I'm going to start this by saying that I don't know if I should be proud of this because it's like it's a personality trait that I don't know who's responsible for for this. And I'm not sure that it's me. But certainly the thing that I like about myself the most is curiosity. Full stop. Like that is the thing that I think it's perhaps not unique. A lot of people have curiosity, but I think that's the thing that makes me tick.
How is it that you're proud of that? Do you have any examples of how curiosity has impacted your life in a positive way?
Yeah, I think in so many ways. I think it actually really defines who I am, both like personally, like when I'm out and about in in amongst people at a grocery store or at a party or at an event somewhere, or even sports. I mean, at a sports event, like I don't watch baseball, or I barely pay attention to football. I don't really watch basketball. I don't go to any games. There've been times when I've been into soccer, but I think that like I can, if somebody says, "Hey, let's go watch a basketball game," I can get into that without any real prior knowledge other than having played when I was, 11 years old on this little team at my school. So I think that I'm interested in the people that are playing. I'm interested in the mechanics of the game. And I think that really flows over into everything. As I said, like I'm interested. I like my job and I like what I do at the place that I work because of that curiosity. And I don't know if you've ever read this book from Neil deGrasse Tyson called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. It's like, what the heck do I need to know about astrophysics? Like, what do I need to know about black holes and about quantum mechanics or whatever, or space travel or whatever? But at the same time, it's like, I think he's an amazing author, and he's funny and he's witty and interesting and tells a lot of cool stories and makes it applicable to people's lives. And a lot of people probably read that book, even if they don't think that they are curious themselves. But I find that sort of thing kind of amazing, and I find I could read a book. I never wanted to go to India, and I read a book from Salman Rushdie with Midnight's Children, and I was in India 1 month later because I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. I got to see this in person. This is absolutely amazing. And I mean, it took me a while to read the book. It's a pretty dense book, so I got excited about it over this period of however long it took me. And then when I finally finished, I was like, okay, I'm buying tickets. So I think that curiosity really flows into everything that I do, and I think I recently found out that word itself, it's considered an emotion. So you don't like you feel joy, and maybe you don't feel curiosity, but you feel curious about something. But it's an emotion where you have this feeling, but it's also this quest for knowledge, and I think that that's kind of a cool mixture between things and really defines who I am in so many ways.
Oh my gosh, you just like completely opened my mind to things. And I love, I love, love, love that you started with curiosity. And it made me think like I should just have, that should be completely the focus of our conversation today. But and that's because you match curiosity with joy. Like those two things that you brought up are emotions that you embody every time I talk to you. So, um, and I mean, given your uh, career, I love that curiosity is right there in the mix. So, given that, I'm going to use it as a segue, which is I am super curious to understand when you and I were talking about what would be the theme of your discussion today. You said, out of the things I proposed to you, you said, I think engagement. And I'm really curious about what is it about the notion of engagement that is interesting to you enough that you'd want to talk about it on a podcast?
So I guess a couple of things. I think like well, I went through this exercise last year with this really smart person that she was helping the organization figure out its vision, mission, and values and do a revamp of that. And I said, let's just jump in. And she said, well, let's talk about you first. And I was like, wait, what? And it kind of turned into this therapy session where it was like, let's figure out what makes you tick. And I came away with this purpose for myself, and I got this purpose statement that like curiosity ties into so much of who I am and what I'm about. And I think it's this cool thing that really, like, there are probably 10 things in my life that have kind of changed the way I see the world. And I think that this is one of those things, this process. And this purpose statement is, let's figure this thing out together. And I think that there are a couple pieces of that. And like, whatever this thing is, what the heck is this thing? Let's figure out how to raise a kid. Let's figure out how to be a family and function well. And let's figure out how to get this bike working well, or how to figure out a public policy problem that we're working on at the Utah Foundation or whatever. So let's figure this thing out together. And the key, I think, to that is the together part. Like, I don't want to do it on my own. I don't want to like like so I'm a meditator. And I think it's funny when people call themselves meditators, but I don't know. That's a thing, and that's, I guess, what I am. I meditate every day for just a little while. But so I have this kind of like, let's figure this thing out. That's my alone time. But the rest of the time, I'm around people. I'm out and about and in amongst the world. And I think that together part is the engagement. It's like, how do I engage my family to figure something out? How do I engage my colleagues to figure out something out? How do I engage you're and Lisa on the board of the Utah Foundation. How do I engage the board? And frankly, I don't think I've done that part yet very well. I'm still working on that. But I think all of this, and part of this is wrapped up in the curiosity. All of this is you never get done with anything. I think that there's no like, oh, now I've figured it out, I can move on. I don't read that many books, but there's another book. I mean, I read books, but there's another book I think about in terms of this. Uh, uh, it's called Miss Simila's Feeling for Snow. It's a weird title, and I think there's a film that's the slightly different version of that title. But there's a passage in it that talks about how, like, I'm talking this through with somebody, only because I haven't figured it out yet. Once I've figured it out, I don't need to talk about it anymore. I can just put it aside and I'll move on to the next thing. But I feel like I never figure anything out. Like it's like maybe it's like astrophysics. Like you just keep going and you learn some things, and it's like, ah, that doesn't always work, but maybe it works here, maybe it works here, and let's figure. Let's is that a black hole or is it something else or is it an exploding star or whatever the heck it is? And so like this. Maybe I'm taking you off path a little bit, but I think that engagement thing is let's work together. I want to talk to you, and I want to talk to my friends, and I want to talk to my family, and I want to talk to my colleagues and my board and policymakers and Utahns and somebody on the bus, and let's figure this thing out.
I love actually that is central to who you are. And especially as a board member on the Utah Foundation, I am thrilled to hear that you, as the leader of the organization, believes in figuring it out together. Because, I mean, isn't that what public policy is all about?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And like we put that purpose statement together, and I was like, oh yeah, that is my job. That is what I do at work. That is what this organization does, which is kind of neat, I think. And that engagement is an important part of that is in terms of figuring things out together. Let's figure it out together, and then maybe we can engage. We haven't talked much about the Utah Foundation yet, but in terms of
Let's
public
do.
policy and
Let's do.
talking about people, talking to people and saying, hey, look at this issue. Here's something that's interesting. It'll give you some things to think about, and it'll give you the vocabulary you need and the concepts you need to have a smart discussion about something, and then perhaps do something about it, or maybe vote for the right person, or volunteer at a place, or do whatever you're going to do or talk to your family about whatever that issue is, and do it knowledgeably and intelligently.
What is the mission of the Utah Foundation that you lead?
Oh, it's cool. So it's a new mission, and we figured it out together, actually. So the vision was
Well
kind of
done.
mine. The vision was mostly mine. I kind of I forced that one through a little bit, but the mission came really with a lot of board input and a lot of staff input, and then the staff also put together these values, and that was the values were mainly theirs. But it's all about the mission is to inform and engage Utahns with illuminating, independent, nonpartisan public policy research. So that's basically I love the words independent in there, and I love the word illuminating. But that informing and engaging people, that engagement is engagement. The reason why I thought engagement would be right is because that word engage is in our vision, in our mission, and our values. It's all through all of those, and in part because that is so important to what the Utah Foundation is about, and that's what we're I'll mention one more thing. Originally, I just wanted to talk about communications and outreach with this person that was like, hey, let's figure out communications and outreach. And she said, well, your mission is, tell me what your vision is. And I told her in like 87 words, because I talk a lot.
Right.
And what's your mission? And our mission was like 43 words long. And she said, let's do that first. And then when we sat down to do that, she was like, let's crack the nut of you first, and then let's do the vision, mission, values, and then let's do the communication part, which is kind of it's a cool approach. I think it makes a lot of sense. And Annalisa, you asked me a question, I think, and I don't even remember what it was.
No, I think that's really good. You talked a little bit about what the Utah Foundation does, but from
Yeah,
my perspective, it's one of the reasons I'm really interested in you focusing on the word engagement, because you're a group of individuals, the staff members are researchers. And I think in our heads, many of us, me included, might think of a researcher doing things alone, that are really, it's all cerebral, or it's getting into minute details of things. Like, researchers are not the folks you think of who would say, I'd like to talk about engagement. So
right.
I would love to hear about how you bring together the idea of research and engagement and why that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love that's the perspective of that. And like when I was little, I remember like I was probably watching Tom Brokaw or something, and we used to always have the news on when we were eating dinner, and when I would hear the word think tank, I thought of like in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, there's a person that's doing math like in like a corn silo or something in somewhere, and they're like in a room by
In a
themselves.
tank.
Yeah, in a tank, and it's a here's this think tank, and so like this there's no windows, and I'm at a desk with a pen and a calculator or something, and that's kind of this thought that I had. But what in terms of researchers doing research by themselves, we are very collaborative to start with. Like I'll talk about that first. Like we work on these projects by ourselves. Last night we were in the office changing up the order and kind of the fundamental focus of a report with three people all at once on one person's report, and like talking about these things. We do that all the time, and we review each other's work, and we give each other ideas for stuff, and we check each other. We're nonpartisan. It's important to be nonpartisan. So we have, we've all got biases, and we've all got our own ideological kind of grounding or whatever, and so we've got a nice mix of people in the office that can kind of check each other, if they're uh, pulling the punches on something, or if they're a little bit too hard on something or too forceful on something, if they've got some cognitive bias that they maybe aren't aware of or whatever. So, but after we do that part and engage on whatever that issue is, then we're going to get out and engage the public. And I don't want to. So I don't want to be a lobbyist. I'm not a good lobbyist. I did that years ago, and it was stressful, and I kind of thought it was gross for me. And there's some lobbyists I know that do great work, and I love them. I think they're great. But for me, it was like, I can't do this. I don't feel right about this, even if it's an issue that I like. I bike all over the place, and I helped on some biking legislation, got a pretty important bill passed like 12 or 15 years ago or something, and it was. But at the end of the day, it was still like, I don't like this either. Like, even if it's a thing that every bit of it feels good to me, in terms of what that law is. There's other parts that I didn't like how it got there and whatnot. But we want to do research and not just then put that report on a shelf, or if on a figurative shelf in a file folder, or put it on the Utah Foundation website and then not have anybody look at it. So almost all of our research is accessible to the public, and we want people to see it. And how do you get people to see it? One way is, like, this year we're doing a lot of road shows. We're getting in front of a lot of people. We've done it around some Healthy Communities reports, but we're going to do it around one of our signature projects, the Utah Priorities Project, later on this year, and really and figure things out together. Get some ideas in front of people that they can then share with their friends or colleagues or family or whatever, and discuss them. And the Utah Priorities Project is more oriented toward the election. So when you vote, there are some issues that are important to Utahns, and there are some issues that are important to yourself, and maybe those are the same, and maybe you should know about them before you say, this is my one issue, or these are my two issues, or why didn't you do enough about this? And it's like, well, maybe you're talking to the wrong person. Maybe that person doesn't have the policy levers to make a change here, but we can tell you who does. We can kind of delve into the issue and help you understand a little bit more what's going on. So we want people to. There's nothing I like more than when somebody says, "Oh, I read this thing once about this, and I said, who put it out?" And I was like, and they're like, I don't know for sure. And then I ask them a little bit more, and it's like, oh yeah, that's our report. We released that, and we helped you without even you knowing that it's the Utah Foundation. We helped you maybe get a little bit more knowledgeable about something.
Um, I have so many questions that come up as a result of that, but one of the things that I was thinking about is the fact that the mission and what you talked about was nonpartisan research. And I am doing this season focusing on individuals that I call changemakers. And how do you think about the linkage between being a change maker, but also being nonpartisan and focusing on public policy? Talk to me about what that means to you.
Yeah. So I was talking about this with somebody from a state agency today in Utah here, and they're like, well, you guys are effectively lobbyists. And I'm like, no, I mean, we're out there educating, and and we want people to pay attention to our work, but we don't say support this bill, and we don't call a legislator or wait outside the Senate chamber or go to city council meetings to express our opinions on things. But we want to give people the tools to do that if they want on either side of an issue. So the change might be, in terms of a change maker, this is something that's tricky about the Utah Foundation. If we were a lobbyist organization, we could go out and say, we did this, we passed this bill, give us some money, and we'll support you and keep doing it. Let's do another thing and let's pass another bill. At the Utah Foundation, we can point to things and say, oh yeah, like they use some language in this bill for this law last year, or somebody called us up to testify in front of the legislature on something. We were called up to do that this week, actually. So people use our information and use hopefully some of the illuminating independent research that we produce. And they probably are going to use it in a partisan way quite often. But in terms of change makers, we're trying to educate people, and it's a little bit harder to say, yeah, we did that, but maybe we can say, hopefully, people know a little bit more about these issues because of this thing, because of this report, because of this event they came to, and they can talk about it a little bit further, and they see something in the news. We release a report and they see something, and then they also hear something on the radio about that same story, and they're like, oh yeah, I just saw something on the news about that yesterday. And then they see something, then they see a social media post on it or something else, and then you touch them in many different places where they are, so that they then are a little bit more knowledgeable about this, even if they didn't spend a lot of time reading a report themselves.
It's super interesting because I'm going to give you one compliment for the organization, because in this land of what feels like a hyper partisan world that we're living in, I feel some safety knowing that there is the Utah Foundation and that there is nonpartisan independent research that I can trust, that it doesn't have some secret gotcha hidden thing that I don't know yet, because it feels like there's so much of that happening now. So my compliment is to the remaining nonpartisan and independent is harder and harder to do nowadays. And I'm thrilled that the Utah Foundation does that.
I love that. I love it, but I also, like, I can't be proud of that necessarily either. Like, or maybe I'm just afraid of like being hubristic, and I'm afraid of that word I brought up, being proud about being curious earlier. But the cool thing about the Utah Foundation is that we've got so many supporters from so many different places that are just kind of pitching in. I mean, it's a significant amount, but it's little in terms of the overall budget of the organization, so that we can't, like, if we stepped out on something and said this is what we should do, and I'll tell you why, it's because I think that this issue is an important thing, and I care about it, and I'm not going to tell you about the details from the other side of this. Suddenly we'd have a whole bunch of people like,
Yeah.
what the heck, what was that? So it's like we've set this organization up to check itself. Both, I think we've intentionally done that very well with the staff that we've got, but I think that we've done that, like, by the very structure of this organization being what it is. I mean, we've said things before that people were mad at, that we've had board members get mad at and say, you know what, I don't know, I'm not sure we can support you anymore because we don't like what you're saying. I'm like, well, it's true. Like, it may be true, but I mean, there's a way to say it that makes it softer, and we don't like it. And so we lose people, but then we gain other people, because I think that some people feel like you do, Annalise, where it's like, it's important to have some organization out there that's doing this. And I wish we were 5 times bigger than we are, so that we could be looking at a
Everywhere.
whole host of more, but yeah, looking at all the issues, well, and or a lot more issues, and then even doing even better at communicating that out to the public so that they're like, oh yeah, this is, I've heard this and I know that organization and I trust them and I believe it, and this is more complicated than you think, person who is an ideologue on whatever that one issue is.
When you talk about engagement, I'm interested in, you talked a little bit about what you do with your staff, and I know that we'll have people listening to the podcast who are in all sorts of work environments. What do you do? How do you think about engagement when it comes to your colleagues at work, especially as a leader of your organization?
Yeah, I think that we have always had a bit of autonomy in terms of like, you figured this thing out, like go delve into this. I may have researched this in the past and I know some stuff, but I'm not going to tell you what to write. And so I think that helps get people engaged because they're like, oh, I'm curious about this, this, and this. And then once we see a draft of whatever that work is, and it's like, well, so that is good stuff. And some of that might be a teeny bit off base, but what about a couple other things that maybe you got to pay attention to? And I think that's we have a collaborative environment, and I think that's a really a way to engage a lot of people is to feel like they have a voice, like in terms of setting up the values of the organization and really supporting the putting the vision together, the mission together, and the vision. Like they have a voice in those sorts of things, but they have a voice in other areas as well, and especially in the research, because I think the people that work at the Utah Foundation like that kind of, like that autonomy that they experience, and like being the lead on these projects, and are there because that's the engagement piece, I think, for my colleagues. And it's interesting, we've had people, I had this volunteer once, this intern come once, and he was just finishing up his Master of Public Policy program at the University of Utah, and he was with us for, I don't know, like 4 months or something, and we took him out to lunch on the last day, and it's like, so what is the thing, what's the thing you're stepping away from this internship? And he was like, man, the stuff you do is so boring. And I never want to do it as long as I live. And it's like, wait, what? This, you're graduating in 2 weeks. It's like, I know. I'm going to do what I was doing before. I love working with kids and I love this other thing, and I'm not going to do, I don't want it. It's mind numbing. But I think that if you, and he just, maybe wasn't curious about those kinds of issues. And if you can engage staff in a way that gets them pumped up, then hopefully you keep them around for a while and they become experts in some areas, and become change makers, themselves.
Shawn, I think you hit on a couple of things that I love these parts of the conversations. One is I love that you talked about providing autonomy and some independent ownership that you automatically are giving to your staff as part of their roles there, because all of the research shows that we all need that. All of us want to have some kind of our own independent, autonomous work, and not as much rote, right? In our work in order to find meaning. So already that's happening for your folks. And then I love the story of the guy that he figured it out. I used to always tell my students, when you're looking at a potential career choice, go and follow someone on their most unsexy day. Like go to the thing that is like and because every job has like the cool, exciting, sexy thing. And then it also has the things that are probably even more time that are not as exciting. And if you still love the things that are the unsexy days, then that's the job for you. And if you don't, go keep looking.
Yeah, that's perhaps like the most worthwhile internship of any intern that's ever worked at the UW Foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them have like turned. We've got two people that were interns that then became employees. So maybe hopefully, fingers crossed, that was successful as well. But we help people get jobs, and a lot of people that are interns will like ask for letters of recommendation and are working for places around the state. But it's important to see to get that kind of information, to get that knowledge before you're at the very end of it, uh,
And
in this case. But
one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is the idea of engagement, and what does engagement mean to you when it comes to your personal life and your family or your friendships?
Yeah. Yeah. So we we play these games like for so in terms of my family. One thing that we've joked about for years is like writing a book about the games that we play to do things to like get things done. And like how do we like let's do the cleaning game and it's going to be 15 minutes where we just do this every day, and then after we get a certain number of check marks then we uh, get whatever the food of the day is that we like so much. Like we actually now it just so happens it's poke bowls now for my daughter, that she's into poke bowls, but it's I think it's engagement around those sorts of things. Like we do the half hour game, which is not really a game. I mean, it's kind of there's something called the Pomodoro method where you do this thing where you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5 minute break. But this is like you do something for a half hour. We're gonna I know it's Saturday, but let's do 6 half-hour games, and 1 half hour will be in the yard, and then the next half hour will be cleaning, and then the next half hour will be reading. And so you mix it in with cool like different things, but I think it's that sort of thing that I think is that, like in terms of my family, that really is an engaging thing. And somehow, even though it doesn't sound like, oh, it's not like it's fun. Like I don't want to necessarily work in the yard because the yard is my wife's domain. I mean, that's what she's into, but I'll go out there and pull weeds, I guess. It's not my thing, but overarching like the kind of that the big full game of it is kind of cool, and we're just mixing things up, and then at the end of the day you feel productive and you're like, oh yeah, that was some for some people a Saturday is about doing nothing, but it feels for us anyway, it feels good to have accomplished something. In terms of engagement, like out in public, you've said to me like how I am kind of like how I'm always on. I'm you said something about
Sure.
full Shawn.
Full Shawn. Full Shawn. It's a
and
thing.
it's and I think that it is interesting. Like uh, I think that is not a some sort of a fake version of me. Like I am totally on, but if I do something that if sign up for something, like Annalisa is going to invite me to go to some fundraiser, and then like an hour or two before I'm going, I'm like, why am I going to this? I want to relax. Like I don't want to. But then the moment you walk through the door and you see the people, and then it's like, oh, okay, this is my thing, and I'm actually curious about what these people are doing here, and what this organization is that's looking for some funds, and how they're putting on the freaking thing. Like it's all of the pieces of it, and I'm like, this is all very cool and all very neat, and suddenly I'm like I've got this heightened attention to what's going on around me, and I think that is like I get super engaged if I'm at a thing. I am not a wallflower. I am I am in the thing, whatever it is. If it's I brought up sports earlier. If I bring my dad to a national football league game and I don't know any of the players, it just like by the end of the first half, it just doesn't matter. Like I am part of the crowd and I am just excited about this as all y'all. And in part because I was kind of asking some questions about some of the things with some people around me in kind of a not really like maybe I'm making some of this stuff like I'm perhaps faking some of my curiosity there, but at the same time it's like I'm here, let's do this thing. But then I'm like, yeah, I get that, I get this, I'm excited about this, and then I'm just as loud as the person that's 4 beers in a couple seats away. um just because it's yeah, I get engaged when I'm out and about. I get engaged. There are points when I'm not, like when I'm like, okay, my motor has run out and I have no more
Hmm.
electricity to run that thing. But if I'm out about and if we're doing something around the house, if we're playing the half-hour game, or if I'm at work, or if I'm going to that fundraiser, I'm definitely engaged, and I want other people to be engaged too. Like if I go to
I
something with my daughter, I get her. I want you to be just as pumped up about this as me. Have you seen these women are amazing playing like shooting these 3-point shots on the University of Utah's women's basketball team? I mean, isn't this amazing? Look at the skill that they have. And then I think it catches on a little bit with her. I'm able to get her kind of pumped up about some of these things.
I don't think you know how unusual that is. And it actually makes me a little bit weepy, which is surprising to me. But as you were talking, I was like, I used to tell this story that really is very like meaningful to me, that when my daughter, my youngest, was a baby, I was having a hard day and everything was busy, and I was stressed, and I was getting her out of the car seat in my driveway, and she was a baby, and I pull her out of the car seat, and the wind blew. That was it. It was like just a big burst of wind. And she went, "Wow, mama." And I remember taking that moment and going like, "Oh yeah." Like the world is,
Yeah.
there are beautiful things that I can feel something about that might seem banal in any other time, but they're not actually. And there's beautiful things happening. And like your ability, Shawn, to bring that engagement and curiosity and joy to your experiences and help other people unabashedly feel curiosity and joy and passion about the magical three-pointer that athlete just did, or the joy in those dudes sitting next to you drinking beer at the ball game, and their friendship that they have. Like there are beautiful things happening around us all the time, and
And
you're the one to remind us.
well, I don't know. I mean, I think if people pay attention to stuff, like I think that's true. It's all about paying attention to whatever's happening around you. And it's like maybe it's like you've had a crummy day, and I'm like, some things happen, but then I took my dogs to the dog park, but then you look up and it's like, oh my goodness, like the sky, how the sky looks, and the sun is shining through those clouds, and it's like, oh, and my dogs are cute and they're having fun. Oh, and these people are here and they're like talking to each other and meeting each other, and there's a lot of beautiful stuff happening. And so what that I had a bad day and then it's like 98 degrees in June or whatever. It's like maybe it's fine anyway. And if we look around a little bit, that's a key to this. I mean, kids pay attention. I mean, that's the thing, and you can't pay attention to everything. I mean, there's so much stuff out there, and I guess that's you age, and then you put up some blinders, and hopefully you can still remove those blinders every once in a while, so you can look around. But you put up blinders to get your job done, or to drive your car and not get run into somebody or whatever the case may be. And so I think that there's an importance to that, and importance to like really focusing that intention on attention on and kind of what you're doing at the time. But I think it is like, and I think that you know this made me think of something that I've said this before to some people when they're like, well, that job does sound boring, just like that intern. Like I'll be telling somebody about my job and they're like, this wow, that's boring. And no, it's not. If you look at any issue, I don't care what it is. If you look at lean recovery for construction firms, it's like what? I don't even know what that is. But if you look carefully at it, there's a lot of cool, complex things about it. And then suddenly it's like, you know what? The closer you look, you see whatever the little cells on the leaves on the tree or whatever, and it is and you see and you really experience that big gust of wind, and it's like and you're excited about the wind and your kid doing that, I think there's stuff like that all the time.
Love it, love it, love it. This gets back to the beginnings of the conversation when I talked about um when you talked about your purpose statement. And I just want to go back to the idea of it, because the whole reason that I started a podcast called 92,000 Hours was when I read an article that we spend 92,000 hours at work in our lives, and it's the thing we do the most except sleep. So we work more than we see our spouses or our children or our friends or watch TV or surf the internet. And so that there's got to be some purpose and meaning, because that's where we spend our lives. So Can you talk to me just a little bit about your purpose statement and how that has helped you with the way you spend your life at work?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm certainly a person that is actively engaged at work. There's Gallup does this research that they've been doing for years and years, and they look at like, are you engaged? Are you disengaged? Are you actively disengaged? Look at these people that are like, I am so mad about the work that I'm doing that I am only going to Facebook today or whatever it is people do, or TikTok or whatever today. Um, and uh, and I do feel like I've had jobs over the years where I'm like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I'm not totally interested in whatever this is. It looks good from the outside, but you can only do it so long. I guess the thing about that being engaged for those 92,000 hours for me is about having, staff, like I said, they get autonomy in much of the work that they're doing. And I think that's important. We've written about kind of the alternatives to bachelor's degrees. So you don't need a bachelor's degree, but there is something about a bachelor's degree where you maybe put in some effort to get that, and then that you trade that for a little bit more autonomy at your work. Like you may not get paid more, but you may have a little bit more power to kind of set your own goals and do your own thing, which I think is, for some people that's important. For other people it's not important. For me it's definitely important. I think I need that sort of thing. And I think that I there was a point. I'll just tell you a story real quick. I went through. Not only did I have that very cool experience to discover my purpose statement, but a few years earlier, I went through this kind of this job analysis to say, how do you match with the job you have? And maybe and then you can find the job that you need, or whatever the case may be. And so you go through this whole big thing, and you write down all these cards, and you categorize them and organize them, and you come up with this thing. And at the very end, the person was, it was kind of neat. She made this comment. She was like, this is weird. And I said, what is weird? She said, I've done this a lot, and I've never seen somebody that has the job for them. And I was like, oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't look for a different job. I guess maybe there's something about this, and I think it is, and I'm probably lucky in that way. I'm not proud to have the job. I mean, that's another thing where it's like I lucked out. I lucked out maybe with some curiosity, and I lucked out with finding a job that allows me to explore my curiosity in some ways. But I don't know if that answers your question, Elisa. I guess it's I think that there is something to be said for having some engaged people, and then hopefully that kind of rubs off on the other people around you, where it's like, yeah, let's get into this thing. Let's figure this thing out together and be excited about it.
I love it. I have one more question about your work before I move on. And the question that I want to ask is, you brought up some of the work you regularly do, and one of those things was the Utah Priorities Project, and you do that during election years. And I know that in this year, that part of the title was Fed Up. And I am really interested in the linkage that I probably see myself that may or may not be there, but or maybe it's my worry, that is that it feels like people are fed up with the hyper partisanness, like, and there's a group called the Dignity Index that's looking at how we talk to each other. And I think that the more and more contempt that we show to other people ends up removing us from people, like, they're fed up. They don't want to be part of it anymore. So I'm interested in how you see that learning that you got, as well as what does that mean and how important is it to have an engaged citizenry in order to be a functioning, appropriate democracy? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, that is the key, I think, to this whole thing. It's about, so there's a book written recently that talks about like armchair politics, and it's just like, it's like watching sports. It's the sports game, and I'm talking to these people, and the guy's all excited with drinking his beer, and he's yelling about the team, and he's yelling against the other team, and he's in support cheering for for whomever the receiver is or whatever. And I think that we do that quite a bit with politics too, where it's like, I don't like this person actively, or I do like this person actively because of the party they represent or some one stance that they support or whatever. But I think that there's something about like that. There's something about having those conversations with each other in a nice, dignified way, and to have those conversations about these issues that affect all of our lives, whether they're national things or state challenges or local challenges or whatever, that if you are providing people with some information about some of the nuances around these issues, they might be able to have a more open and honest conversation with somebody that's not instantly you're just shutting each other down because you're like, oh, you're such an idiot. You believe this, you're dumb. What's wrong with you? But maybe, oh yeah, I understand kind of why you believe that, and this is where I am on this topic, and this is why, and maybe it'd be interesting to have a conversation about that. And maybe, and some people are like, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't care. But if you do look a little bit more carefully at the cells on the leaves of the tree, if you look a little bit more carefully about at that, whatever that policy is, and about the complexities of things and the complexities of life or whatever, and you pay a little bit more attention to that stuff, then maybe, okay, so I don't like the person that you support, but I understand where you are, and I see some of the things that why people do support these issues, this particular issue, and I understand a little bit more about it and those complexities, and yeah, let's have that conversation, and that engagement. I think the more engaged you are, the more engaged you're going to get, because you're going to learn a little bit more about an issue, and you're going to look beyond whatever that headline is, or look beyond whatever that tweet is, or that TikTok thing or whatever, and see that, be like, okay, I need to think a little bit more critically about these, because I know that these are just headlines. I mean, I think that that's an important piece of that civic engagement.
I love that so much. I love that you brought it back to seeing all the way to the cells of the trees, because, it reminds us that all of us are on this, floating rock together, and we've got to figure it out. And we all have things, and we've got to figure it out together.
Right,
I
right.
just got that. Because we're in it together.
Yeah,
There's that we can see that either as a detriment, or we can see it as a gift that we're all in this together. So I'm grateful for you to talk to me about all of this. And I want to make sure that I wrap up with my last question that I always ask. And that is because I started my interest and curiosity in getting to know people in the way that we're talking today through a mentoring program. And I love to make sure I take a moment to honor the mentors that people have had in their lives. And I'd love to have you tell me about a mentor that made a difference in your life and share it with all of our listeners.
yeah. So you gave me a heads up on this question, Annalisa, and so I have three. Can I have three?
That's very Shawn. That's full Shawn of you.
It's complex. The world is complex, Emily. So we got to
That's right.
figure this out. But I got to start with these. My list was longer, honestly, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this exactly. But I'll tell you one thing. I thought that I knew a lot about critical thinking. I thought I was a good critical thinker, and then I took a class from this guy named Dennis Way, who's up at the University of Utah in the geography department, and he it's a class that I actually ended up teaching for years, and I wanted my class to be as beneficial as his was. um, for me. He really got me to not to be cynical about everything, but to read something, some policy thing with such a critical eye that you can be like, oh, okay, I see where this is coming from and this all makes sense, but there's also some flaws with this. And maybe if we thought about this and address those flaws, we'd understand things a little bit further. So I think Dennis Way is a big one. There's also I had another professor called Kathleen Zick, and she really is the one that got me into a public policy program up there originally, and just became a friend, and is a fantastic parent, and is a fantastic spouse, and is a fantastic traveler, and has done some really important research. So she's mostly retired now from the University of Utah from the Family and Consumer Studies program. But I think she's one, but also and not just to get points with my family, but I think that if I had not married who I married, I would probably be I'd be working at a tiki bar in Bali or something. Like she really is great at helping me see through. She's also very curious and see through some of my own kind of blinders that I have on, and lower some of those so I can figure things out and sometimes analytical, but given that we're married, sometimes it's the opposite of analytical ways. Sometimes it's just emotion. But she's also very curious and actually has taken. We heard about a program from Kathleen Zick, who was that professor that got me into the Master of Public Policy program. Kathleen was putting together this doctoral program in Family and Consumer Studies around policy, and she told us both about it years ago, and then it never escaped. It never left my wife's brain. So she's actually in a program now, this policy program in Family and Consumer Studies, and actually it gives me a lot of the language. She's an artist and gives me a lot of the language for the stuff that I think about through her art. A long time ago, she did this. I mean, I've talked a lot about attention today. She did this program, this cool public art program called Intention and Attention, and kind of where we want to be and where we actually do place our attention. And it's a cool thing. It's this big map that she created, and I've thought about it for so long. And actually, intention and intentionality is kind of, those are my words of the year for this year for my career. And at the Utah Foundation, I want to be more intentional about the things we do, and I don't want to just pay attention to whatever the fire is that I need to put out today, but I want to set this big longer term kind of goal. And I think that she through her art and through the person she is, I think she's transformative and is a great mentor.
I love that you have your spouse as one of your great mentors and literally talked about her as transformative. That's lovely. What a joy to have this opportunity to talk to you about all of these things: engagement, intentionality, joy, research, public policy. All of it is so important and timely. And I'm really grateful that you were willing to do this with me, because I think that the work you're doing is in fact change making, and I appreciate it.
This has been a ridiculous amount of fun. I love it. I love it so much. I love talking to you every single time, and this is definitely no different.
My thanks to Shawn for his engaging conversation and insights. You can learn more about him and the incredible work that he and his team are doing at utahfoundation.org. And you can also connect with him on LinkedIn. Next week, our change maker to join us will be Sarah DeMark, who is Vice President of Workforce Development and Credential Integrity at Western Governors University. And Sarah will be talking with us about optimism. I hope you'll join us.